Who is Jerry Goldsmith? Greetings, everyone. My name is Dan Hobgood, and I've been a film music instructor and commentator for more than 25 years. I was a longtime contributor to Film Score Monthly online, and in the early aughts received an invitation to be one of the inaugural members of the International Film Music Critics Association. The focus of my film music scholarship has been the subject of this presentation, and I promise you that if you're not familiar with the name Jerry Goldsmith, you do know his music. Jerry Goldsmith was a Los Angeles area native born right before the Great Depression to Romanian Jewish parents Tess and Morris Goldsmith. Morris, who incidentally lived to the age of 101, was a renowned structural engineer in L.A. Fitting, given that his son Jerry would go on to be a structural engineer of sorts himself. More on that later. Jerry began studying music at age 6, although he says that he didn't become serious about it until his adolescent years. He had two teachers primarily, Jacob Gimple, who would later perform in several of Jerry's scores, and Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, who was a composition teacher to the stars, if you will, with his other students including Henry Mancini, Andre Previn, and John Williams. In fact, Castelnuovo Tedesco was recently the subject of a movie called The Maestro, starring Xander Berkeley of 24 fame. Jerry began his career in 1951 at CBS, yet not as a composer, but rather a typist. Soon enough, Jerry would manage to woo his way into the music department, where he would hone his scoring skills writing and even performing, often live on air, for famed shows such as Playhouse 90. At CBS, Jerry began to work with filmmakers who would employ him for decades to come, as he transitioned from radio and television to feature films. In that realm, Jerry's first kingmaker was legendary film scorer Alfred Newman, who was also 20th Century Fox's music director at the time. Newman, father of Thomas, uncle of Randy, by the way, initially enlisted Goldsmith to work with two other Hollywood legends, Kirk Douglas and John Huston. Goldsmith's first collaboration with Douglas produced the star's all-time favorite project, 1961's Lonely Are the Brave, and Jerry's first project with Huston garnered the score his initial Oscar nomination for the movie Freud in 1962. Dozens more nominations would follow over the course of a career with hundreds of credits, a career that would include an Academy Award win and numerous Emmys as well. In 1995, Variety made not Elvis, not Sinatra, not Michael Jackson, not John Williams, but instead Goldsmith, its inaugural Music Legend Award recipient. I guess in part because, as John Williams' own longtime orchestrator Conrad Pope has said, Jerry Goldsmith was the conscience of film music. Seemingly before his time, and with so much creativity still raging within him, Jerry Goldsmith died 20 years ago this past summer, following a years-long bout with colon cancer. Now, on a happier note, the pivotal moment in Jerry Goldsmith's life occurred in 1945, when he went to the cinema to see Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound, and heard its eventually Academy Award-winning Miklos Rozsa score. After this film-going experience, a teenage Jerry resolved to do two things. First, marry Ingrid Bergman, naturally, and second, become a film scorer. Hey, as Jerry might have said, batting 500 is doing better than even Teddy Williams. Ultimately, Jerry did do okay for himself in the marriage department, though. You'll see. Among the 300-some credits of Jerry's are a Best Picture Oscar winner, numerous Best Picture nominees, culturally significant films, box office hits, and the practically acknowledged best sports film ever made. Goldsmith scored the film that won Sidney Poitier the first lead acting Oscar ever awarded to a person of color. Jerry scored the first $50 million movie, the first major TV miniseries, and Julia Roberts' first lead role. Jerry was the go-to/favorite scorer of everyone from Sean Connery to Frank Sinatra to Michael Crichton and William Shatner. Goldsmith scored movies starring nearly every major thespian in Hollywood during the latter half of the 20th century, and the directors with whom Jerry worked included the aforementioned John Huston, John Frankenheimer, Otto Preminger, Robert Wise, Frank Schaffner, Roman Polanski, Richard Donner, Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, Martin Campbell, Paul Verhoeven, John McTiernan, and Curtis Hanson. Indeed, the name Jerry Goldsmith would make for a quite boring round of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Heck, Jerry even scored the namesake for the game, for crying out loud. And in 2024, no fewer than 3 movies became the latest entries in franchises that Jerry Goldsmith helped launch. Plus, Jerry's music featured prominently in every one of the new films. Of course, Jerry won his Oscar for his mostly terrifying score to 1976's The Omen. Here he is accepting that award.
The nominees for original score are Bernard Herrmann for Obsession, Jerry Goldsmith for The Omen, Jerry Fielding for The Outlaw Josie Wales, Bernard Herrmann for Taxi Driver, Lalo Schifrin for Voyage of the Damned, and the winner is Jerry Goldsmith for The Omen.
When he won that award, it was, for us, like the shot heard around the world. We heard from friends, acquaintances, admirers. People sent out such accolades and love, and were genuinely thrilled around the world from all corners. And it didn't stop, I remember, for 2 weeks straight.
I don't really know what to say. I must thank Richard Donner and Harvey Bernhard for making the film in the first place. Lionel Newman for conducting it so beautifully, Arthur Morton for beautiful orchestration. And the Piper's dream did come true, dear Carol. Thank you.
Just to note, The Piper Dreams was a song derived from the score's thematic material. Now, despite the hundreds upon hundreds of hours of music that Jerry has written, one 30-second piece is, at this point, his most listened to and well-known, and what he is bound to be most remembered for. See, I promised that you all knew Jerry Goldsmith music. According to critic David Hirsch, Jerry Goldsmith is the acknowledged master of the genre of film music. While John Williams gets the public accolades, Hirsch adds, Jerry was the scorer whom his peers carefully watched. He set the standards that others constantly emulated. Contemporary Grammy-winning composer Austin Wintory concurs. I know that virtually every composer worships Jerry, Wintory has remarked. He also says, I've often heard that John Williams is like the composer of the people. Goldsmith is the composer's composer. Film scorer and one-time Goldsmith pupil Marco Beltrami, probably best known for scoring the Scream movies, has stated, without Jerry, film music would probably be in a different place than it is now. Beltrami continues, I think that Jerry, more than any other composer, bridged the gap between the old Hollywood scoring style and the modern film composer. And then there's this from Jerry's most well-known contemporary. Yet perhaps the great Henry Mancini offered the most poignant tribute at a Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony for Goldsmith in 1993.
One thing he does, he keeps us honest, and the second one is he scares the hell out of us. You do, Jerry. You're just perfect.
So why did so many of Jerry's colleagues think that he was, if I may borrow Mancini's words, just perfect? What made Jerry Goldsmith unique? Well, by my count, film composers have made, and can make, a name for themselves in at least one of 4 different ways. For one, they're melodically gifted. Think of the aforementioned Henry Mancini or John Barry. Or 2, they're innovative, like Alex North or Ennio Morricone. Versatile, Elmer Bernstein, John Williams. And or dramatically incisive. And the person who best fits the bill here, pre-Goldsmith, would be the legendary Bernard Herrmann. Jerry Goldsmith is the only film composer I can think of who checks all of these boxes. Melodically gifted? Yep. Innovative? Definitely. Versatile? Look, if Jerry Goldsmith isn't versatile, then literally nobody is. Dramatically incisive? Like a boss. What's more, Jerry Goldsmith isn't merely the only film composer who checks all of these boxes. He's also, if you'll pardon the pun, basically the gold standard in these categories. For as notable as the first 3 categories are, though, the last one is that which I want to zero in on. In film music's first generation, scores were almost exclusively Wagnerian in nature, populated with character-associated musical signatures that Wagner himself called leitmotifs. Jerry came along and basically said, this doesn't make any sense. For one, Wagner popularized leitmotifs for operas, which are different from movies, most of all with respect to music, where it, instead of being the focus of attention, is in the background. Accordingly, film scores need to be more obvious and digestible. Second, Jerry would have argued, leitmotifs are overly denotative, set decor, and insufficiently connotative. Scores principally should tell you what you don't already know, not just regurgitate that which is on screen. Third, if you're truly going to process a leitmotivic score, you have to identify and then track all of the signatures therein. To do this, you'll have to divert so much attention from the rest of a production that you can hardly concentrate on anything else. And again, that's only so as to gain fairly superficial information. Worst, though, Jerry asserted that the leitmotivic approach is simply illogical narratively. Slapstick comedies or the like aside, films aren't disjointed, a series of disparate parts. Rather, films are relational. Everything in a picture synergetically is supposed to contribute to conveying whatever its moral, message, etc. is. So, if a score is supposed to be complementary, it too should be synergetic in nature thematically. Goldsmith said this about his approach. If you examine my scores, I try to build everything out of one basic theme. I write a main theme, and then I pull a couple of notes out of that, switch them around, and develop another motif, so that all of the material is related within that one score. I think that this approach is absolutely essential. You shouldn't write a completely new piece of music for different scenes in a picture. Everything ought to be tied together somehow. Really, think of a Goldsmith score like you would a tree, with the overall theme, the trunk, and the branches, the variations thereupon. Now, Jerry's career didn't constitute a complete repudiation of Golden Age scoring. Like a Max Steiner, or an Eric Korngold, or an Alfred Newman or Mickey Roza, Jerry did advocate for a reliance upon melody and tonality in film scoring. As a devoted student of Jerry Goldsmith, I can safely say that those who would define him as an atonal or experimental scorer are dead wrong. Even Jerry's most unconventional scores, such as Planet of the Apes or Alien, have a melodic or at least tonal thematic nucleus. Jerry was indeed a melodic composer, and every Goldsmith score that I'm familiar with has hummable thematic material. So then, the principal characteristics of a Goldsmith score are as follows. First, that thematic synergy that we were talking about earlier. Second, a basis in melody. Third, customized orchestration, so that Patton doesn't quite sound like Chinatown, which doesn't quite sound like Hoosiers, which doesn't quite sound like Total Recall. And last, minimalist spotting, because Jerry believed that for music to be most effective, it should appear only when absolutely necessary. Critic Daniel Schweiger has said that perhaps Jerry Goldsmith's greatest talent is his ability to tell a story with music alone. Similarly, upon Jerry's death, John and Al Kaplan, fellow Film Score Monthly contributors of mine, wrote, "Goldsmith was and likely will forever remain our greatest film composer, but there was more to him than the gloriously memorable themes, the mixed meter action writing, the clarity of voice, the sheer lack of filler, the mastery of counterpoint, and the unique instrumentation. It's been said before, but there was an uncanny symbiosis between Goldsmith's scores and the films for which those scores were written. While his material is influential as absolute music, the actual application of his music is where his real genius lay." Which, effectively, is to say that the best salesperson for Jerry Goldsmith is Jerry Goldsmith. And the best thing that I could do here is let Jerry cook, in the context of a movie that he scored. Naturally, this led me to wonder, of all the hundreds of films that Jerry did score, what's an ideal one to show you? Well, for the recently published, multi-volume, 1,000-page retrospective on Jerry's career, appropriately entitled The Jerry Goldsmith Companion, author Jeff Bond interviewed current film scorer Christoph Beck, primarily of Marvel/Ant-Man fame, about the time that he spent under Jerry's tutelage. And here's what Beck had to say. He, Jerry, truly was like the greatest professional athlete of our time, in music. The great athletes bring their entire being and their total effort into every game that they play, and I feel like Jerry did that with every project that he was on. I never felt like he was phoning it in, and that's a big part of his legacy. He would bring in pieces that he was working on from recording sessions, and it's amazing music. Music that was just so much better than the film deserved. And it occurred to me then that, wow, film composing really is a true art form. The first time that this became apparent was for a film with Mel Gibson called Forever Young. That Beck cites Forever Young is so interesting to me because Forever Young was, for me, what Spellbound was for Jerry. And I think that Forever Young is a super film for what it is. My mother and sister saw it when it premiered in 1992, came back and said that I had to see it myself, that they would go see it again so as to take me. And what proceeded to occur was a transcendent experience. I was a film music fan already, but in hindsight, hearing Forever Young was when I became a film score fan. Because of how thoughtful and well-structured the music was, I could tell that it wasn't just quality music in and of itself, but also something that was crucial to the film's impact. Now, I don't want to spoil too many of the details, but I do want to preview the thematic nucleus for the score, which sounds like this. La-dee-da-da. La-dee-da-da. Does that sound like anything to anybody? What's the title of the movie? Forever Young. Old Hollywood trick. Also, take note of Jerry's use of pulsating electronics throughout the score. And with these elements in mind, I'll leave you with two questions. One, when do we hear a full statement of the theme that I just previewed? And two, what is Jerry telling us through his music is the real enemy of the movie? So, without further ado, I present to you Forever Young, with a score by film scoring's master, Jerry Goldsmith.